The film begins with Tori and Kyle Breyer's struggles to conceive a child, evident from books on the shelves. Despite their attempts, they are unsuccessful. During their latest attempt, Tori senses vibrations from a crash outside. Initially dismissing it, they are startled by a stronger tremor that causes the lights to go out. They rush to the window and witness the aftermath of the crash. The narrative then shifts to a video montage of Brandon, their child, growing up. After glimpses of these clips, Tori engages in a game of hide and seek with an older version of Brandon. Later, Brandon is shown answering a question in school, catching the attention of a classmate named Caitlin. Returning to their farm that night, Tori is painting while Brandon unknowingly sleepwalks to the basement and discovers a meteor, likely the object he arrived on Earth in. Filled with anger, he chants and attempts to approach it, but Tori manages to calm him down. The following morning, Brandon sets out to mow the lawn. Frustrated with starting the mower, he hurls it several hundred feet away. Curiosity leads him to approach the spinning blade, where he surprisingly stops it with his bare hand, completely unharmed. The family later visits a diner with Tori, Kyle, Kyle's Aunt Marilee, and Uncle Noah. When Noah offers Brandon a toy gun, Kyle reprimands him, but Brandon demands the gun persistently. As the family departs happily, a waitress observes them. The next morning, Kyle realizes Brandon is not paying attention to him. He notices Brandon chewing on a fork without any harm to his teeth. In an attempt to bond with him, Kyle takes Brandon hunting, showing him a rifle and discussing the changes in his body, prompted by Tori finding lingerie ads under his bed. That night, Brandon stalks Caitlin while listening to a slow rock tune. She discovers the source of the music coming from her laptop and shuts it off. Uneasy, she suspects Brandon may be watching her from a nearby window. Suddenly, her mother, the earlier waitress, bursts in, concerned about her daughter's distress and breathless from anxiety. Meanwhile, back at the farm, Noah and Tori search for Brandon and eventually find him. The next day at school, Tori speaks with Brandon's teacher, who notices Brandon engaged in mysterious drawings in his notebook. Tori inquires about the drawings, but the teacher closes the notebook and walks away. Returning to the farm, Kyle witnesses Brandon startling some chickens. Concerned, he asks Brandon if everything is alright, to which Brandon affirms. They both head inside. Later, Tori and Kyle discover all the chickens have been killed outside. Tori suspects a wolf, but Kyle believes Brandon is responsible, given his previous presence there. At school the following day, Brandon and his classmates participate in a trust fall exercise. Caitlin remains anxious about the previous night's events but keeps silent. However, when Brandon falls to the ground as a classmate fails to catch him, Caitlin refuses to help, labeling him a pervert. Brandon denies the accusation, but the coach forces Caitlin to assist him. Unexpectedly, Brandon grips her hand tightly, causing her to scream in pain as he breaks it. Subsequently, Brandon finds himself in the principal's office while Tori apologizes to Caitlin's mother, explaining that it was an accident. However, the mother is doubtful and demands the sheriff's intervention, but he refuses, opting for special sessions at school for Brandon. Amidst the ongoing argument, Brandon silently gazes menacingly at Caitlin's mother before the family departs. Later that night, Brandon overhears Kyle and Tori discussing him. Tori, concerned about recent events, reads about meteors but is interrupted when she notices something unusual happening in the barn. She rushes out to check on Brandon and finds him levitating inside the barn, surrounded by a glowing presence, possibly related to the meteor. He continues chanting "Take the world" as she approaches, but then suddenly falls and cuts his hand on a fragment of the meteor. Worried, Tori goes down to tend to his injury and tries to calm him down. However, he becomes agitated and accuses her of lying to him before running off. Meanwhile, as Brandon walks in anger, he screams and unleashes laser beams from his eyes. Later, he pays a visit to Caitlin in her bedroom while she types on her laptop with one hand. He assures her not to be scared and emphasizes how special he is. Caitlin mentions her mother's warning not to talk to him, but Brandon declares that he will take care of that. Tearfully, she watches him leave, finding a flower he left behind for her. Meanwhile, at the diner, Caitlin's mother is closing up when she notices something peculiar. Stepping outside, she sees diagrams on the windows, resembling those drawn by Brandon. The lights flicker, and suddenly the windows shatter, causing her to sustain a glass injury to her eye. Sensing a presence, she grabs a baseball bat and swings at a shadowy figure that swiftly flies by. Failing to make contact, she retreats to the safety of the cooler, locking the door. Desperately seeking refuge, she discovers Brandon using his laser vision to burn through the door. He tears it off and gazes menacingly at her before charging forward, presumably killing her. The next morning, Brandon meets with his parents, assuring them that everything is under control and that there is no cause for concern. Back at the diner, A sheriff and his deputy investigate the gruesome scene, including the remains of Caitlin's mother. The sheriff discovers one of the diagrams drawn by Brandon on the window. Merrily, who is also a counselor, attempts to talk to Brandon about his recent behavior, but he remains unresponsive and unwilling to explain what is happening. The counseling session proves fruitless, leading Merrily to consider involving the police due to his concerning behavior. Later, at a bar, Kyle confides in his friends about the incident involving Caitlin's hand, expressing his growing belief that his son is a monstrous being. Back at home, Merrily experiences flickering lights in the bathroom while going about her activities. Later, Brandon shows up at Merrily's house, insisting that he needs to talk to her. He warns her not to involve the police, as it wouldn't be beneficial for anyone. Merrily advises him to go home, and he seemingly complies. However, he lingers outside her window, observing her as she texts Noah. Brandon re-enters the house wearing his costume, but Noah returns and discovers him hiding in the closet. Noah escorts him out and threatens to inform Brandon's parents. As they prepare to leave in Noah's truck, Noah tries to force Brandon into the vehicle but is violently thrown against the garage door. Though injured, Noah manages to get up and drives away in fear, convinced that Brandon is following him. Suddenly, the truck starts to swerve uncontrollably and loses power. Despite Noah's attempts to restart it, Brandon appears in front of him, prompting Noah to scream in terror. Brandon lifts the truck off the ground, suspending it in midair, and then forcefully crashes it down. In the process, Noah's jaw is brutally broken, and Brandon approaches him. As Noah lies dying, Brandon uses his blood to draw another symbol on the ground. Brandon returns home and claims that he was playing soccer the whole time. He explains that he lost his shirt due to being bullied. That night, Kyle has a nightmare that reveals how Tori discovered the baby inside the meteor and decided to adopt him. However, the dream unsettles him when the baby's eyes emit laser beams. Awakened by a phone call, Kyle and Tori rush to the hospital where Merrily is waiting. Merrily informs them of Noah's death, and they provide comfort and support. Merrily mentions that Brandon had visited her earlier, causing Kyle to become concerned. The next morning, they inform Brandon about Noah's demise, but all he responds with is a cold okay. Kyle grows suspicious and accuses Brandon of being involved. Tori tries to calm Kyle down, but his anger escalates. Suddenly, Brandon forcefully shoves Kyle into the pantry, breaking the doors in the process. Tori sends Brandon away. Later, Kyle discovers Brandon's shirt with traces of blood on it but manages to discreetly remove it without Brandon noticing. He apologizes to Brandon for his earlier behavior, but later that night, Kyle confides in Tori about his findings, but she refuses to accept what he's suggesting. Meanwhile, the sheriff examines the accident scene and notices resemblances between the diagram found on the window and the symbol drawn on the ground. Kyle looks through old birthday cards belonging to Brandon, attempting to comfort Tori during their evening together.